Welcome, welcome to another installment of the Goddess Keys, where we activate and align with the divine mind, remembering all of those keys and codes to our sovereignty, our sacredness, and all of our spiritual gifts. And today we are going to discuss the blessings of Saturn. Yes, I said it, the blessings of Saturn, the beneficence of Saturn. I know that this is completely out of alignment with how Saturn is generally depicted within the false matrix simulation, but there's a big reason for why Saturn is seen as being so scary. I mean, if you don't have a mastery of Saturn, yes, Saturn can be very scary and can do a lot to mess your life up, or at least that lack of understanding, knowing, awareness, or remembrance of working with Saturn. Because I think what a lot of us need to know, anybody like who's tapping into this channel, who's really aligned with these messages, more likely than not, you have ancestral remembrance somewhere of working with Saturn in a very different way than how Saturn has been utilized today in the false matrix simulation. But what do I always like to say about the false matrix, right? It's built upon inversions, and a lot of times it's going to be your biggest weaknesses that actually are your biggest strength. It's just that you're in an inverted system. So up is down, black is white. So you think that that your gift is your oppressor, if that makes any kind of sense. Okay. So let's uncover the beneficence of Saturn. So this message has been cultivated in my consciousness for the past few days. I've been meaning to get this message out, but a reading that I had with a client the other day actually contextualized some stuff for me. And we were talking specifically about Jupiter, and I was explaining to her just the ways that Jupiter a lot of times is used against us in the false matrix simulation, especially as it relates to swap destinies. And now in the false matrix, like we're taught in astrology, right, that Jupiter is the great benefactor. It's the gas giant. It expands things. And that if we want wealth and if we want abundance and all that good stuff, then we align with Jupiter. But to be honest, this took me a while to come to this conclusion, but I have come to the conclusion that in the false matrix simulation, Jupiter can be very mean, harsh, and sometimes vicious. Okay. And even if, especially for folks who are sacred sovereign beings, right? And you have been put under specific mind control programs to keep you out of alignment with your power, you're going to find that your Jupiter is doing really weird things in your chart. And even if it looks like your Jupiter is in a nice position, a lot of times you'll find by looking at your birth chart that your Jupiter is very vulnerable to being manipulated in some sort of way. So you might have a harsh aspect to Saturn, for example, with your Jupiter, or you might have a harsh aspect to Chiron or Pluto with your Jupiter. These are some of the things I've found. So most of the folks who come to me for readings or that I do coaching with have weird stuff going on with their Jupiter. All right. 9 times out of 10, that's the case. All right. And so I've found that actually if you're like looking to exit the false matrix simulation and to rescript your reality, really rethink your connection to Jupiter and stop depending upon Jupiter to save you. I think we've been conditioned a lot of times to look at Jupiter as the great benefactor, but a lot of times Jupiter is going to represent the powers that be. It's going to represent Zeus, and Zeus is really big. He's kind of like, if we were to describe him in third dimensional reality, he would be the corporate businessman of the multinational corporation. All right. He'd be that 1%er. That would be Jupiter. Okay. So yeah, he is the gas giant. Yeah, he does expand everything around him, but it's done in a very manipulative way a lot of times, and it's done on the backs of a lot of others. Okay. So I would definitely recommend that if you are getting into astrology, really ignore a lot of the astrologers out there that are trying to tell you like how to work with Jupiter. increase your wealth and stuff like that. Because if your Jupiter is really, really viciously aspected, you're just going to go around in a big old karmic loop. Okay. However, you work with Saturn, then you can learn the rules that the false matrix simulation is based upon, and then you can break them. Okay. You know that saying, learn the rules so you can break them. And everything I share is based upon my own experience. Like all the offerings that I provide, the coaching that I do, all that kind of stuff is really to like kind of time travel back to a version of myself who didn't know these things, and to give that person this valuable information so that it doesn't have to be so hard and nasty. Like spiritual awakening and activation doesn't have to feel so heartbreaking and like your world is caving in. Like there might be some moments like that, but if you learn the rules so you can break them, then ideally you should be able to have a lot more ease, flow, and fun in your life. And I firmly believe that while we're here, while we're in this kind of time matrix, why not turn the prison into a playground? Okay. And our playground can look a lot different than the controllers of the false matrix manipulation. I mean, their playground has been based upon exploitation and scarcity consciousness and warmongering and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't have to be our playground. We can create our own structures. And in order to do that, we work with Saturn. Saturn creates structures. So Saturn has been painted out to be the mean guy. First of all, Saturn's not a guy. It's a divine feminine energy. Okay, I'll concede with maybe saying that Saturn is androgynous. Definitely not a father. It's not daddy Saturn. It's not father time. Like that is a bunch of BS. Okay. But I would actually take it a step further and say that Saturn is a divine feminine energy, the crone energy, okay? So not the divine feminine, that's like the Venus type or all that kind of stuff with the flowers or the pregnant, fertile mother. Saturn is going to be that crone energy, that big mama energy, not just grandmother, but great grandmother energy, okay? So, I just want you to think about like, if you've ever spent time with your great grandmother, or if maybe you weren't able to spend time with your great grandmother, but you've heard different members of your family talk about your great grandmother, it's always done with an extra level of reverence. Okay. The great grandmother is kind of removed and exalted within the family bloodline because that is like the extreme matriarch of the family. Right. So if you go to your great grandmother's house, you're not going to act up. Right. Because you'll get popped, okay? Like crone mother energy, all right? So that is the energy of Saturn, all right? So yeah, you do need to be on your best behavior sometimes, right? You do kind of need to humble yourself and be like, you know what? Maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I do need to learn. Maybe I do need to be as a child, okay? But there's a lot of great gifts as it relates to things. Like your great grandmother is going to give you some top-notch wisdom that probably no other member in your family is going to be able to give you. Number one, because she's going to be coming in with that really matriarchal energy. And then she has a very long memory. She's been through a lot, that sort of thing, So she's that wise elder. All right. So your great grandmother is going to give you that kind of care and attention that you're just not going to find just out in these streets. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you're reckless. You don't want to be reckless with Saturn. You don't want to be for play with Saturn, or else you'll get popped. You will get energetically, spiritually popped, physically, all that. Okay. It is scary in that kind of way. Okay. But if you choose to be as a child and drop the ego, okay, I think that's a big thing. When you work with Saturn, you got to drop the ego. You got to drop the pomp and circumstance. So when we think about Jupiter, that's all pomp and circumstance. It's gas giant. What do we call somebody who's really full of themselves? Like, they're full of gas, that sort of thing. Or like when you're kind of complimenting somebody, what do? You gas them up. Now, Saturn is also a gaseous planet as well. But first of all, there is a command of angles that you need to have when you are working with Saturn. So basically all of the things that are going to support you on your journey to spiritual mastery. I'm not going to say everything's going to be found in Saturn, but a lot is going to be found in Saturn. Let me give you some examples of some of the things that you'll master through Saturn. Sound and frequency, sacred geometry, working with the angles, navigating the angles, time, learning about how time works in the false matrix simulation, how time has been manipulated, how to collapse time, how to jump timelines. Okay, karma, same thing. What is your positionality as it relates to karma within the false matrix simulation? How has karma been used against you? How has karma been transferred onto you? Okay, so like really learning about that kind of stuff. Ancestry, working with your ancestors, connecting with your true ancestry, like working on clearing duplications of ancestries or false or swapped ancestries, which can happen. All right, if we're not mindful. These are all things related to Saturn. Saturn rules time. Saturn rules sacred geometry. Also the code and the algorithm of the false matrix simulation, and the reason why I say that is because it's the structure of the false matrix simulation. Code algorithm is what creates the structure. So then you would want to get at the code of the false matrix and learn that too. And so that kind of goes into that whole cosmic mathematics, connecting with not only the sacred geometry, but the numerical codes running within the false matrix simulation, and then learning how to create your own codes and that sort of thing. Okay. So yes, sound, frequency, time, karma, ancestors, code, sacred geometry. One more thing that I'll add, ley lines. All right, grid systems. And I mean this in a very planetary kind of way. So like working with the Earth's ley lines, but I also mean this like in a more grander cosmic kind of way as well. Like how do ley lines connect with cosmic energies? And on that note, I would also place the study of astrology within the realm of Saturn. Now, I know maybe some people might say that this is kind of more of an Aquarian kind of thing, but we got to remember, y'all, Aquarius is co-ruled by Uranus and Saturn. Okay. So when I think about the study of astrology, this is the code a lot of times of the false matrix simulation. This is kind of the code that creates the script of your life unless you choose to transcend it. Okay. So this is like learning about the different house systems, which is ruled by numbers and that sort of thing. It's also ruled by charts and graphs, sacred geometry, that kind of thing. Okay. So Saturn is ruled through constriction a lot of times. At least this is how Saturn has been harnessed in the false matrix simulation. So Saturn has been demonized a lot of times. A lot of times we think about malefic magic or malefic occult practices as coming through Saturn, or what they call the Saturn moon matrix. I'm not saying that's not true. Okay. I'm not saying that Saturn has not been heavily manipulated against us. Okay. But as I said earlier, we want to learn the rules so that we can break them. Because when we do that, then we can learn how this immense power has been utilized to our detriment, and then work with Saturn, learn about it so that we're able to harness that energy to actually create new structures. All right. Folks who identify as light workers or star seeds, okay, shadow workers, people who are here to shift the way that the earth is moving at this particular time, right? To make a deep impact in one way or another. You need to learn about the structures of the false matrix simulation. There's no getting around it, because you're here to create new structures. So you need to learn about the structures, all the ins and outs of the structures that are here currently, so that you can get underneath the hood of things and create the new structures that are going to be needed. Okay. So that means having a mastery of Saturn, having Saturn on your side, not being afraid of Saturn, Okay, a really quick story. I was like really caught up in the whole thing around, oh, I need to reclaim my Jupiter. This was like when I was really dealing with some karmic stuff, and I was like, I need to reclaim my Jupiter. And I was like really fascinated with being on my Jupiter line. Okay. But it was so interesting because the universe kept conspiring. The way I perceived it at the time was that the universe kept conspiring against me to keep me in Saturn time loops, because literally I kept my life circumstances kept on having me on my Saturn line. Okay. I would be, and literally like life circumstances would have me literally travel all the way across the other side of the world just to go from one part of my Saturn line to another part of my Saturn line. And I thought I was being punished, I thought that I was just, paying for all of the karmic debt that I had accrued in all different realms and dimensions, or my ancestry's karmic debt. And then I was just going to be a slave to karma and all this kind of stuff. And I just felt so oppressed by it. Okay. Because I was just like, I just want to be, I just want to experience the beneficence of Jupiter. That was kind of the vibe I was in. All right. Now, in retrospect, my Saturn line, being on my Saturn line, I learned so much. Okay. It was uneventful in the external. Okay. Because there was a lot of just studying, reflection, learning about my ancestry, learning about the mechanics of different things related to the false matrix simulation and all that kind of stuff, learning the basics of grid work and all that and everything. But it got me to the root of learning about how karma is manipulated, like really getting under the hood of things. Okay. And then it was like, as soon as I unearthed that, then I was immediately, a door opened up for me to be right on my Jupiter line. Okay. In my false matrix birth chart, I have a really harsh Jupiter Saturn thing happening. Okay. So it was really my higher self, or my innermost self, and my ancestors protecting me in a lot of ways, because had I went to my Jupiter line without clearing up the Saturn stuff, then it probably would have not been good for me. Okay. So that's another thing, is like, sometimes we just want to cut to the good part, right? To the happily ever after, because a lot of us have been like brainwashed in this system to like have instant gratification. And that's something we're unlearning more and more every day. We're unlearning this process of instant gratification. Okay. And it was me living on my Saturn line and doing that diligent work that support me with cultivating the genetic path cutting system. It was something I had been working on years prior, but things weren't fully clicking until I was on my Saturn line and I went deep into a lot of study and all that sort of stuff. So I would definitely say, if you are having a hard time with stuff related to karma, time, curses too. Curses are ruled by Saturn. If we think about hexes, literally Saturn has a hexagram on the planet. Okay. And also a hex, that's a form of sacred geometry there. And then, one thing that you'll need to do as you're navigating things is learn how to command the angles, learn how to command timelines, collapse timelines, know when you're in an artificial timeline, know when you're in a time loop. I think time loops are the absolute worst, because like in the etheric, you're kind of like just literally, on a wheel going nowhere. You think you're going somewhere, but you're just on the same wheel, like a little mouse. Okay. A little gerbil. So, you got to learn the ins and outs of that and work with Saturn so that you're getting out of those mind manipulations. Now, in the false matrix, they would say that Saturn is ruled by the earth, right? So it's like Saturn's ruled by Capricorn. Capricorn's supposed to be an earth sign. But I even think that is somewhat inaccurate information. I do think that there are parts of earth in Saturn, especially as it relates to the ancestors, the bones, and then also as it relates to like the ley lines, grid systems. But Saturn surpasses anything of this planet, okay? And this is where it gets really etheric, all right? So you need to have a command of that fifth element, ether, and Saturn will support you with that. learning about all of the unseen realms, you got to go through Saturn. Okay. And so a lot of the folks that demonize Saturn will have you worship the sun in one way or another. Heliocentrism is at the heart of a lot of different major religions, okay? But it didn't always used to be that way. Long time ago in ancient times, Saturn was considered a sun. And that's one thing we need to kind of get in our heads is like, as we become more and more multidimensional, we get out of just like there just being one way to do things, okay? There's more than one sun, all right? There's more than one moon. So that's not even to say that there's no validity in the solar sun that we see in the sky every day, but let's hold space for the possibility that there's more than one sun, okay? And a long time ago, Saturn was that sun, okay? That being said, I'm not here to glorify Saturn and say that there's not some really big karmic stuff to clear up as it relates to that. Yes, the energy has been utilized to literally bind us, okay? Bind us to this planet. Bind us to karmic cycles, bind us to really harsh karmic miasma and ancestral trauma. Yes, Saturn has been used in that way, okay? And so there is that nasty aspect of Saturn too that you got to get through to get to the beneficence of Saturn, okay? A lot of the controllers of the false matrix, they'll throw like heliocentrism in your face and all of these main religions. And then in the background, they're working with Saturn to create this whole artificial simulation. So it might be of your best interest, if that's the case, then to learn the ins and outs of Saturn. And to do that, I would highly recommend the Genetic Path Cutter DIY Oracle system that I've created. This is something that you can access either on my Patreon if you want to have like access to a whole bunch of different subliminals and meditations and all that stuff. Or I also have a direct download PDF on my website. If you're not into the subscription thing, I totally get it. You can download it, but it will support you with really getting to the crux, cutting past all the fluff and really getting to the crux of certain karmic loops that you're in and what will need to be cleared as it relates to certain karma, certain soul contracts, certain ancestral storylines, so that you're not like a slave to Saturn anymore and that you can experience the beneficence of Saturn. The beneficence of Saturn is experienced through genetic path cutting, okay? Now, there is, like I said, Saturn isn't all sunshine and rainbows, as we all know. Okay, we all know this. It's a very somber, harsh energy. The more you run away from it, the scarier it's going to be and the more it's going to kick you in the butt. That I will say, okay? But I want to give you an example of a historical figure who really showed or exhibited the beneficence of Saturn. So I want to talk about this musician back in the 1960s who was from Chicago, or at least resided in Chicago, named Sun Ra. He was literally like out of this world. He said, and if you look at him, I'm showing a picture of him now. He even said, like, I'm not from here. I'm not a human. I am from Saturn. Okay, he affirmed that. And so I just want you to think about that for a moment. I just imagine that this guy is walking down the streets of Chicago today in 2024, which is when I'm recording this. And just imagine him just saying, I'm not from Earth, I'm from Saturn. And I want you to just kind of think about how people would perceive him and how people might try to label him, or what kind of boxes, literal, figurative boxes, they might try to put this person in, because he's dressing up like an alien, or he's saying he isn't extraterrestrial. I don't know if he called himself an alien per se, but not human, that he's from Saturn, okay? But Sun Ra had a mastery of Saturn. I mentioned earlier that sound and frequency is a really big piece of mastering Saturn, okay? And so he was able to share his divine gifts during his time on this planet with the creation of music, okay? And a lot of melanated people have this love for music and this love for creativity and all that sort of stuff. But we got to think about it. The time when he was alive and the time when he was creating his music, there was a huge stronghold on the music industries as it related to the music industries. Like, this was the era of the Berry Gordies and like all of those really, really oppressive music record labels. Okay, there are still oppressive record labels now, but they don't have nearly as much power as they did back in the day, because now we have the internet, we have websites, we have YouTube, that kind of stuff. We didn't have any of that stuff during the time of the 1960s and 1970s when Sun Ra, or I think also it was around in the 50s, I have to double check that. But when Sun Ra was around, there was none of that. Okay, so here's this guy dressed like this, saying that he's from Saturn, and he's a musician. And he's not only a musician, he is a creator of his own orchestra, although it wasn't an orchestra, okay, because he's already tapping in with Saturn by being a musician and creating his own orchestra. He called it an orchestra, A-R-K, okay, not O-R-C-H, orchestra. Okay, so now we're getting into the sacred geometry aspects of Saturn. He utilized not just sound, but he was also utilizing sacred geometry and commanding the angles through his music. Okay, and somehow, some way, Sun Ra was not only able to completely be his authentic self and play his music and create his orchestra, he was also able to create his own record label and publish all of his music with complete creative control. Unheard of during this time, okay? He wasn't a complete anomaly. He was out of this world, quite literally. And he utilized the energies of Saturn to do that. And I mentioned earlier that Saturn way back in the day was considered to be a sun. So I find it interesting then that his name was Sun Ra, okay? And he said he was from Saturn. Sun and Ra, both relating to the sun, okay? So this was somebody who was able to learn the rules so that he could break them. He was a out of the closet starseed for sure. Okay. A lot of us are starseeds, but we're not walking around dressed like this, or saying we're from Saturn per se, or just like out in interviews talking like this or putting it in our artwork all the time. So we're becoming more bold as it relates to this. But here was this out of the closet starseed Sun Ra, who was just like, nah, I'm from Saturn. And I'm not going to dress in human clothing because I'm not a human. I'm from Saturn. And I have an orchestra. And I'm going to create my own record label. And I'm going to be completely financially sovereign. And I'm going to completely fund this orchestra. And I'm going to do whatever the heck I want to do. That's the power of Saturn, y'all. That's what happens. If you want to look at what happens when a starseed has command of Saturn, has the beneficence of Saturn on their side, look at Sun Ra, okay? Look at Sun Ra as a template. Now, that being said, I'm not going to just completely idealize Sun Ra. Like, he had really strict, harsh regulations as it related to being in his orchestra. Any musician who was in his orchestra, they were not allowed to drink, do drugs, or have sex. And you kind of were like playing music from like sun up till sundown. I think he was like channeling cosmic energies with them because he was utilizing the sound and then the arc system and stuff. And then they dressed in a very particular way when they were playing music. So I think he was definitely working with them to channel a cosmic energy. Maybe this was like kind of cultish kind of vibes, like some of the musicians couldn't really hang. They could only be in the orchestra for like a couple years or something, because then they were like, I kind of want to like do other stuff too. That being said, I don't fully blame them, of course, for like not wanting to have like certain influences as it relates to like substances, because what happens in the music industry a lot of times with very talented artists, right? They get addicted to a lot of different things. And a lot of times this is done by design, because people who are addicted to certain substances are a lot easier to have their like consciousness controlled, their creativity siphoned, etc. So I think he knew about the mechanics of that, and he wanted to kind of run that clean ship, quite literally, so that it didn't impact the cosmic energies being channeled. You know, some people might say, okay, that might be a little too Saturnian. That's why I get scared of Saturn, because it just seems like there's no days off. Like it's a constant grind. It's a constant hustle, that sort of thing. And that's why you learn the rules so you can break them. So a big piece of the awakening process is unlearning this concept of grind culture. This is why, like, in the beginning of my journey and the offerings I provided, I worked a lot more with folks as it related to unlearning grind culture. That's something I still do in my sessions and all that, but it's less of a priority, just because that's a karmic loop I've broken through, thank goodness. And because I've broken through it, it doesn't show up as much in my reality, but it is something I still support folks on, because it is something that's embedded. You know, grind culture is embedded in this false matrix simulation. And a lot of times it can keep us on this hamster wheel of feeling like we're moving, but we're just literally on a karmic loop. And so, yeah, there is a way to work with the beneficence of Saturn from a state of ease and flow, especially once you start time hacking, and then also clearing false karma that's not yours, finding out where all the hidden karma is, where all the combust karma is, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And that's something you can kind of try out through the genetic path cutting deck. And I have some other downloads where I talk more about that. But yeah, there's also, you know, making sure that you are out of that grind culture mentality, so that you are having a mastery over Saturn, and that Saturn's not mastering you. Okay. Because when you're in grind culture, you're basically Saturn's bitch, kind of. I don't know. And so you don't want to be caught up in these weird time loops through like having that grind culture mentality. All right. So that's kind of where I wanted to end things today. I also just wanted to say, if you are interested in taking a deep dive, I'm offering 3-month, 9-month, and 12-month coaching journeys. I have the Sapphire package, which is the 3-month journey. And then I have the Diamond package, which is the 9-month journey. And now I'm debuting my newest offering, which is the Black Diamond coaching package, which is the 12-month coaching journey. And I'll be sharing more information about these. I'm no longer doing Pearl coaching. I've learned a lot through that offering, and I'm just looking to go a lot deeper with folks and, just take a deeper dive. And so I think the 6 weeks is helpful, but I think I would prefer to work with folks in the either 3, 9, or 12-month sort of capacity. Like if that's something you want to pursue in 2025 and really work through this Saturn mastery sort of thing, then definitely reach out to me. And sending you lots of love. Until we meet again, y'all. Bye.